MEMS Technology webinar series as a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, an initiative of Government of India to celebrate and commemorate 75 years of progressive India. So now this is the final session, the 11th session. The topic MEMS fabrication, lithography, and the faculty would be Mr. Harsha of CMTI. So I would like to, before we start the technical session, I would like to introduce the organization to you all. So our institute was established in 1962 in technical collaboration with WIOSO, a leading R&D center of Czech Republic, and is managed by a governing council assisted by a research advisory board, and started with an objective to support industries to achieve excellence in technology and stimulate economic growth. So this slide shows you the CMTI's tryst with technology. So from 1965 to 1970, it's technology development for machine tool. 1974 to 82, NC technology, noise and vibration, fluid power metrology, etc. 1984 to 88, CAT, CAM, CAE. 1992 to 97, CIM technology, FMS, and IT in MT. 1998 to 2007, ultra precision engineering, rapid prototyping and tooling technologies. 2008 to 2014, nano manufacturing, HRD, industry ready engineers, mechatronics and automation, additive manufacturing, industrial vision, sensor integration engineering, MEMS, etc. And 2013 to 18, D&D axial piston pump test rigs, qualification testing of aerospace components and subsystems, D&D of customized test rigs, D&D of textile weaving, DTM machine tool and subsystems, Demo and Development Center for Industry 4.0, Surface Engineering. So we get mandate funding from Government of India. The knowledge we get knowledge from academia, IITs, IISc, CSIR, international experts. So we are solution providers and incubation, tryouts, deployment, product development services from to industries. The core competencies. You could see the 4 pillars: design, manufacture, inspection, assembly, and testing. So in product development, special purpose machines, machine subsystems, special products, inspection and test systems, R&D, co-creation with academia, productization of proof of concept, technology development, patents and publications, lab services, metrology and calibration, fluid power and testing, noise and vibration, chemical and metallurgy. The HRD, postgraduate programs, corporate training programs are available. We do conduct short-term training programs, customized, tailor-made training programs also we conduct exclusively. You can download or view our training calendar in our website. So I will send you the link through chat box. So for any special kind of training programs, please always come back to us. We will help you out. And we do conduct seminars, workshops, and conferences. MTech student projects are available. Keep visiting our website. So these are the various centers of our organization. Center for Machine Tools and Special Purpose Equipments, Center for Smart Manufacturing, Precision Machine Tools and Aggregates, Center for Sensor, Vision Technology and Controls, Center for Micro Nano Manufacturing and Metrology, Center for Additive and Special Manufacturing Processes, Center for Skill Development, Center for Business Development and Support Services, Center for Planning, Finance, Administrative and Engineering Services. So these are the laboratory services we offer. Chemical laboratory, NABL accredited, laser calibration of machine tools, metallurgical laboratory, metrology, inspection and calibration. Again, it's NABL accredited, noise and vibration laboratory, testing of hydraulic components, and oil condition monitoring. So our resource person and today's faculty, Shri Harsha S, and currently working as a scientist C at our institute. MEMS and Sensor Group, MEMS and Sensors Group, Micro Nano System Engineering Group. The center is Center for Sensors, Vision Technology and Controls. He has completed his Masters in Technology, VLSI and Embedded Systems, working in the field of sensor design and development, packaging of 2D microsystems, and he is involved in dicing of silicon, glass, ceramic, etc., substrates, wire bonding of dies and packages in MIL sizes through wedge, ball and ribbon bonding, bond strength validation through push, pull, shear and vector methods as per MIL standards, fine pitch flip chip bonding, thermocompression, ultrasonic and UV bonding, fabrication of thin film temperature sensor, electron beam evaporation of metals and dielectrics, lithography, direct writing. He has presented more than 10 papers in national and international conferences, mentored many graduate and postgraduate engineering students. So this is about our faculty, Mr. Harsha, and over to you. Thank you all for providing me this opportunity.
Thank you, Manjunath. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Manjunath, could you please also confirm whether the screen will be visible?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see your screen.
Is it in full screen mode now?
Yeah, now it's in full screen.
Thank you, Manjunath.
Yeah.
Very good afternoon to all the participants who have joined for this online webinar series. This is the last webinar in the MEMS technology webinar series that we are conducting from CMTI. So the last webinar is about the fabrication process of MEMS, which is lithography. Let's move ahead with the presentation. So I'll try to cover what are the major lithography, why it is required, different techniques, and what are the essential aspects of the lithography in order to get best results out of the process. So I'll run through different types, the necessities as well. So let's start with why do we need lithography? When we want to arrive at a device in microsystems scale, just thin films or any other individual process will not result in the device. So even if you consider a simple device like a transistor, the layers of thin films are patterned, etched, and coated in order to arrive at a basic device. The combination of these processes is nothing but a lithography process. In order to pattern, in order to etch, there has to be a basic design that has to be arrived at, and the pattern has to be transferred. Using this lithography process, we can create millions of devices in batches on a single device as well, depending on the size of the device that we are trying to fabricate. So what is lithography? In general, if we have to define, it is nothing but a transfer of geometric shape in whatever way we want as per our application onto a surface. This surface is generally a wafer which is very smooth so that it can be used for microsystems and other devices. How do we transfer this geometric shape onto a surface? Either by using a mask or a laser, or at times even a tool with a sharp tip can be used for transferring these geometric shapes onto the surface. So this process in a generic term is termed as lithography. So what are the types of lithography that are available for us in order to fabricate devices at different scales? When I talk about different scales, I am talking about the critical dimension of the or the feature size of the device that we want to have as the final application. The different types constitute all these listed on the slide, starting from optical lithography up to dip pen lithography. The most vastly used lithography technique is optical lithography, which is also known as photolithography technique. In this photolithography technique, it uses optical radiation to image the mask onto a silicon wafer using a photoresist layers. We'll talk about what is a mask and photoresist layer at a later point of time. The other aspect or the other types of lithography include immersion lithography, which is an extension of optical lithography in order to improve the resolution. Then we also have extreme UV lithography, electron beam lithography, focused ion beam lithography, and X-ray lithography, which are the recent advancements in the lithography field. And moreover, there are certain non-conventional lithography methodologies which are present in today's scenario. They are nano-imprint lithography, plasmonic assisted lithography, laser interference based lithography, nanosphere shadow lithography, and dip pen lithography. In this presentation or in this talk, I would like to cover mostly on the optical lithography techniques because that itself is a vast subject, and probably we can see the other aspects at a later point. So let us move ahead with photolithography. So what is photolithography? It is, as termed earlier, called as optical lithography or UV lithography because it uses a UV lamp as a light source that is used to expose the patterns. It is a process used in microfabrication to pattern parts on a thin film or the bulk of a substrate, which can also be called as a wafer. This technique uses light to transfer the geometric patterns from a photomask to a photosensitive chemical, which can be called as a photoresist, onto the substrate or a wafer. A series of chemical treatments then with either etching or the exposure of the pattern into the material is enabled either through deposition of a new metal or a material in the desired pattern on the layer below the photoresist. In complex integrated circuits or a CMOS wafer, it may go through the photolithography cycle as many as 50 times. So in order to arrive at one device, we may have to run the photolithography cycle as many as 50 times in the CMOS wafer cycle. In microsystems, this number of cycles are limited to less than 10 because the application point of view limits the process extensiveness. This process occupies almost 40 to 50% of the total wafer process time. When we consider we have a wafer ready, that is, for example, a silicon wafer ready, and if we consider that as the start of the time, and by the end of arriving at a product, the photolithography process consumes almost 40 to 50% of the total wafer process time. In this step or in this technique, we can also determine the minimum feature size that is possible during the process required for the application. The primary application of photolithography is generally the integrated circuit or microsystem patterning processes. Secondarily, it is used for printed electronic boards, name plates, and printer plate applications as well. As shown in the diagram, which is a very standard diagram when anybody refers to the photolithography process, it involves coating of photoresist temporarily onto the wafer, either by dispensing method or by spray coating method. Then it is exposed to a UV light through a patterned mask. The photosensitive layer then gets hardened, which is coated on the wafer. Further, it can be developed to in a chemical solution to arrive at the patterns which are desired. So what are the basic requirements of the photolithography process? What are we looking at when we, at the end of a photolithography process, what should be our major consideration? We should try and achieve highest resolution possible. We should have a high photoresist sensitivity. We should also have precision alignment and precise process parameter control. And we should also look at low defect density. These parameters are listed keeping in mind that the entire process of fabrication of a device is very, very expensive, and the consumables that are involved are also equally expensive. So if we take care of these uh, factors, then we will be able to arrive at a higher yield when we complete the process step. So we just listed out the parameters which are of importance to us, but how do we achieve them? Especially when we call this term as optical lithography, what are the factors that are affecting the optical part of the lithography method here? That can be listed into four different parameters, namely optics, light diffraction, resolution, and depth of focus. So light diffraction is one of the important aspect here because it directly affects the resolution of the feature that we are looking at. So as shown or indicated in the diagram, you can see on the right hand top, we have a mask placed and light is being transferred. Light is being allowed to pass through the mask, but there is nothing to focus the light here. So the light gets diffracted at this point, and the intensity of the projected light, as you can see in this image, is very less. The same process, if it is done by incorporating a lens in between in order to have all the light rays to be focused onto a single point, then whatever diffracted rays of light were there will be collected by the lens and will be focused. There is very less diffraction after the arrays are focused by the lens. Through this method, we can see the difference between what we can arrive at as an ideal light intensity pattern here as compared to the diffraction without lenses. So it is very clear that we have to reduce the light diffraction in the method of optical lithography. How do we reduce? So we can reduce the light diffraction based on three factors. We can start by using shorter wavelengths that can be used. Optical lens can be used to collect and enhance the images. We can also use lens with large numerical aperture that can capture higher order of diffracted light and generate a sharper image for the purpose. So moving ahead, the other two parameters, resolution and depth of focus, are also of prime importance in the optical lithography method. When we talk about resolution, it is the minimum feature size that should be repeatable for our process. How we can define or determine the resolution? It can be determined by wavelength of light and numerical aperture of the system. When I say determined by, we can try and change the wavelength of the light and numerical aperture of the system in order to have or arrive at better resolutions. We can also improve resolution by increasing the numerical aperture as indicated. The last parameter is the depth of focus. The depth of focus is that the range of light which is in focus and can give or achieve good resolution for the projected image. As shown in the image, we can clearly see that the center of focus, if it is present at the middle of the photoresist, then we have a very good depth of focus and we will be able to arrive at very good results. So smaller the numerical aperture, we have a larger depth of focus, and we also get a higher resolution if we have a smaller depth of focus. By focusing by having the depth of focus concentrated on the middle of the thickness of the photoresist, we will be able to achieve better results. Now let us see what are the different consumables or materials that are being used in the photolithography process. When I was trying to explain the definition of the photolithography, we defined two terms. One is photomask and the other one was photoresist. So let's look into the aspect of photoresist now. Photoresist is a photosensitive material which can be temporarily coated on the wafer, which can be used to transfer design image or design pattern on it through the exposure mode. It is very similar to the process of capturing an image on the film of a camera. So what is the photoresist consist of, or what is the basic composition of the photoresist? Photoresist mainly consists of four different components, namely polymer, solvent, sensitizer, and an additive. So polymer is a solid organic material which changes its solubility due to photochemical reaction when it is exposed to UV light. And a solvent is a liquid that dissolves polymer and allows thin PR layer spinning. Additives like added chemicals to achieve desired results. A major example would be dyes that are added to reduce reflectivity in the process. So what are the different types of photoresist that we generally come across in the photolithography process? The major two categories are positive photoresist and a negative photoresist. The differences are very clear. A negative photoresist is insoluble after it is exposed, and when developed, the unexposed parts dissolve in the development step, and it is very cost effective. Whereas the positive photoresist is soluble after the exposure, and when developed, the exposed parts dissolve as contradictory to the negative photoresist. But we will get a very better resolution, a higher resolution using the positive photoresist. As shown in the image, we can see that there is a substrate and there is a photoresist coated onto that. There is a mask or reticle placed and there is UV light exposed. If we have a photoresist here like this, then if the reticle is in this shape, this part which is not which is directly exposed to UV light will stay with if there is a negative photoresist. This is after development, and this portion stays if it is a positive photoresist. So the difference between the positive photoresist and the negative photoresist can be seen here in terms of shape of the photoresist that is after development. We get a very fine uh, finish, or what should I say, we will get a pattern with straight lines when we use a positive photoresist, and there is some distortion when we have the use of negative photoresist. So what do we expect, or how do we choose the photoresist? What should the photoresist consist of when we want to use it for a particular application? So we definitely wanted to have a higher resolution and high etch resistance, a good adhesion to the substrate, a wider process latitude, that is which has tolerance to process condition change, irrespective of whether we use it in uh, different clean room conditions or different machines. Across them, the photoresist should be having a wider process latitude. In terms of resolution, when we go to thinner PR, we tend to get a higher resolution and lower etching and ion implantation resistance when we have a thinner PR. So what are the factors that affect the performance of the photoresist? So the resolution, adhesion, exposure rate, sensitivity, and exposure source, which in general terms is a UV lamp, the process latitude, pinholes which get generated during the process, particle and contamination levels have to be maintained at a very low levels. The step coverage and thermal flow are the factors that affect the performance of a photoresist. these have to be taken care and selected appropriately for a particular application. Photo masks are the other aspects when I was trying to define a definition. The photo masks are used to transfer the patterns which are written on them to the photoresist which are coated onto the wafer. So the different types of photo masks that are available are photographic emulsion on soda lime glass, or there is Fe2O3 on soda lime glass, or a chromium coated with a thickness of about 50 nanometer on soda lime glass, or there is also chromium on quartz glass for a very high resolution requirements. Generally, these masks are available in different sizes, say about 4 inch by 4 inch for 3 inch wafers, 5 inch by 5 inch for 4 inch, and 7 by 7 for 6 inch wafers. The wafer size will be 1 inch smaller as compared to the photo mask that is used for the transfer application. There are again two types of polarities that are possible in photo masks. One is light field and the other one is dark field. In light field, mostly the mask is clear and the drawn feature is opaque. In dark field, it is mostly opaque and drawn feature is clear. So let us move ahead and see what are the different steps or the process steps involved in photolithography. So photolithography consists of the following steps. It can broadly be divided into photoresist coating, mask alignment and exposure, and development. Under photoresist coating, we have surface cleaning, dehydration bake, spin coating with the photoresist, and soft baking. Likewise, the development phase can be divided into development and inspection, hard baking, and post-process cleaning if necessary. As shown in the flow chart, the cleaning of the substrate comes first, then if necessary for the application, there is a deposition of material or a sacrificial layer. Then there is an adhesion promoting layer that is to be applied in most cases, above which a spin coating of photoresist layer is done. After the photoresist is coated, there is a pre-bake of the photoresist layer, and then we move ahead with the alignment of wafer with the mask and exposure to UV light in the mask aligner. After the alignment is done, there is a post-exposure bake which can be used, further followed with the developing process. After the developing process, etching of unwanted material or removal of photoresist is required to arrive at the pattern what we are desirable for. This entire flow has to be maintained for one layer of the device. So in a device, as mentioned earlier, in IC fabrication, there are as many as 50 cycles that we may have to do. Likewise, in microsystems also, we will have to do the entire flow, follow the same for different layers. Once all these layers are patterned and available, then we can go ahead with the releasing of the sacrificial layer. Now let us see each one of these process. What is surface cleaning? The purpose of wafer cleaning is to remove contaminants, particulate matter, or reduce pinholes and other defects which are present onto the substrate even before taking up the photolithography process. By conducting the surface cleaning process, we will be able to improve the adhesion of the photoresist to the substrate. The very basic steps that involve the cleaning are chemical clean, rinse, and dry. So it's a three-step process, and we have to know what are the typical contaminants that are to be removed before the coating of the photoresist. The typical contaminants are listed on the left-hand side. It varies from dust, which will be coming out from scribing process, or it can be atmospheric dust present, or abrasive particles lint from wipers, which are generally used for cleaning, If there is a multiple step of photo resist coating, then there would be a photoresist residue of the previous step, which will be remaining here. Bacteria and films from other sources are also possible to be present. But how can we minimize them? The dust from scribing can be minimized either by using laser scribing. Of course, there are certain disadvantages of laser scribing as well, because it leads to ablation. Atmospheric dust can be removed by good clean room practices. Abrasive particles either by conducting lapping or chemical mechanical polishing. Generally, we tend to use lint-free wipers for the cleaning purposes. Photoresist residue which is present of the previous step can be cleaned by plasma action process. Bacteria could be avoided by using good DI water of grade 1, and films from other sources can be avoided from stringent cleaning. So there are basically three different methods for surface cleaning. We term them as general cleaning, RCA cleaning, and Piranha cleaning. In general cleaning, we use a solvent with acetone, isopropyl alcohol, and DI water, and agitate with each one of them for about 5 minutes. This is the most used step, and it is done for all the substrates that are incoming for the photolithography process. The RCA cleaning has a particular setup with a magnetic stirrer and a hot plate, which is set up at 75 degrees centigrade. And then we mix the DI water, NH4OH, and H2O2 in the ratio 5:1:1 and bubble it vigorously for about 10 minutes. If it is RCA1, then we use NH4OH, and if it is RCA2, we can use HCl. The classification is based on what type of contamination that we expect on the wafer. It could be the metal impurities or the organic impurities. For organic impurities, we have NH4OH, and the metal impurities, we have HCl. After the exothermic reaction, we can rinse with DI water and dry to gas. The two images show before and after of a sample. The left hand side image shows the sample before RCA cleaning, and the right hand side of the sample shows the cleaning which is done after RCA. Moving to Piranha cleaning, we need to clean it with acetone, rinse with DI water, and the H2SO4 is to H2O2 solution is mixed in a 3:1 ratio, and allow it for exothermic reaction. Then the solution has to be allowed to cool down, because there would be a rise in temperature. Then rinse it with DI water and dry it with N2 gas. As said before, the left-hand side image shows a sample which has some particulate content before the Piranha cleaning, and the right-hand side image shows that there is no particulate present at the same position on the same sample after Piranha cleaning. Now, we understood that the addition of the photoresist to the substrate is one of the most important aspects that is required in the photolithography method. So, what are the factors that affect the photoresist adhesion? It could be moisture content on the surface, or the surface smoothness, or the surface contamination, the stress from coating process, resist chemistry, or wetting characteristics of the resist. It could also be delay in exposure and pre-bake, and the type of primer that we generally use. So wafer priming is one of the important steps that is done in most of the processes in order to improve the photoresist adhesion to the substrate. Basically, we can use any primer that will avoid any water that is present on the surface of the substrate. When we use silicon, we can use HMDS or TCPS or BSA as wafer primers. If we are using gallium arsenide substrates, we can use monozoline C, trichlorobenzene, or xylene, for instance. So the next step in the photolithography process is that spin coating. Spin coating is a method where a wafer is held onto a spinner chuck by vacuum, and the resist is coated to uniform thickness by rotating the stage. Typically, the RPM used is varying between 3000 to 6000, and the time duration is for about 15 to 30 seconds. This process has to be optimized for a particular resist. As shown in the image, we can see that there is a vacuum chuck and it is spun on a rotary axis. There is a wafer to be coated, and the red color shows that the photoresist is being spin coated onto the entire surface after dispensing it from the top. So how do we arrive at the resist thickness? The resist thickness can be arrived at by two parameters. One is the resist viscosity and the rotation speed of the spinner. The resist thickness can be defined as T is equal to Kp square by W root, where K is the spinner constant, P is the solid percent in resist, and W is the spin speed. In the microsystems applications, most resist thicknesses that we use are in the range of 1 to 2 microns, and for very specific applications, we have a higher thickness of resist as well. And it is generally used on silicon wafer. So we can see that the spin coating is done. This is a image or a video of spin coating that is being captured, and it is shown very clearly that how the coating of photoresist is being done onto a wafer. So when we talk about spin coating, there are three parameters that we have to consider. One is the spin rate, the other one is the thickness, and the last one is the viscosity. So this graph here gives us the relation between these three aspects of thickness, spin rate, and the viscosity. Depending on the application and the thickness that we have to arrive at, we can follow the graph for the spin rate and viscosity of the photoresist can be chosen accordingly. So when we do the spin coating, the different stages of photoresist coating can be termed or divided into four. The first one is the equilibrium stage. Once the photoresist is completely coated, then there is a wave formation stage where it is approximately around 2 revolutions. Then there is approximately around 30 revolutions, which the photoresist will look like this. And at the end of, say, about if we have given 1000 revolutions for a cycle, we will end at the spiral stage with edge speed at the corner or the circumference of the wafer. So the factors or the issues that can arise during the process include from spinning artifacts, streaks, and edge bed. Approximately around 30 nanometer variations in resist thickness could be from non-uniform drying of solvent during the spin coating, and approximately 80 to 100 mm periodicity radially out from the center of the wafer due to the spinning artifacts can be observed. The radial patterns, as we saw in the video of the previous slide, radial patterns caused by the hard particles whose diameter are greater than the resist thickness will lead to streaks in the photoresist coating. Then the residual ridge, as we are seeing in the spiral stage, at the edge of the wafer can be at times up to 20 to 30 times of the normal thickness of the resist. And the radius of the wafer edge will reduce, and the non-circular wafers increases the edge bead height. If we are using a square wafer instead of a circular wafer, then the possibility of getting edge bead with higher thickness is more. When the edge bead removers partially dissolve away, and the edge bead either through solvent or optical method. So in order to take out the edge bead, we can use either a solvent method or a optical method to remove them from the wafer surface. So the next step in the photoresist coating is that soft bake. So why is soft bake necessary? In order to evaporate the coating solvent and to increase the density of the resist after spin coating, soft bake step is necessary in the PR coating process. So as seen in the image, there is a hot plate which is placed, and there is a wafer over which the photoresist is coated. When we do a soft bake, the coating solvent is driven off from the surface of the. So typical thermal cycles that can be used for soft bake vary from 90 to 100 degrees for 20 minutes in a convection oven if we are using that methodology, or 75 to 85 degrees for about 45 seconds on a hot plate. The hot plate method is much faster and more controllable, and it does not trap solvent like the convection oven baking. Then microwave heating or IR lamps can also be used in production methodologies, and narrow time temperature window will imply a proper line width control as shown in this graph. The thickness of the resist is decreased by about 25% during the pre-bake for both positive and negative resist, and that means or implies that less pre-bake increases the development rate. So what are the different baking systems? As discussed, we already talked about the hot plate and the convection oven. There is another possibility of using a microwave source with a chuck where the wafer and photoresist is held, and we can still use it for soft bake process. So after the soft bake, the cooling of this wafer is also equally important. We need to cool down the wafer after the soft bake process to ambient temperature. We can either do a natural cooling, or we can also have a water cooled chill plate to have the cool down done. The reason being, the silicon thermal expansion rate is at 2.5 into 10 power minus 6, that is 2.5 microns per degree rising temperature. So if we are considering a 8-inch wafer, which is about 200 mm in diameter, the 1 degree change causes 0.5 mm difference in the diameter. I think the presentation is on annotate mode. Yeah, okay. So now let's see the next step in the photolithography process. We have just covered the photoresist coating methodology out of the 3 broad categories of the photolithography. The next important method is the alignment. The alignment of the wafer and the mask that we use in the photolithography technique is of prime importance to have a proper design transfer onto the wafer. So the alignment can be divided into 3 major categories. One is contact method, the other one is proximity, and the fourth one is projection methodology. So as indicated in the image, here is the substrate, and there is a photoresist which is coated, and then there is a spacer with the reticle or the mask which is being placed. There is a lens here and a UV lamp here. So when we have a UV source and the light is emitted out of that, the lens takes care of the focusing of these UV rays, and it is fallen onto the mask. Here in contact method, the mask and the substrate are in contact. So this method of alignment is called as contact method. In the proximity method, the difference is that there is a gap between the substrate which is coated with a PR and the mask. So this can be achieved by either placing the mask using a spacer in between both the substrate and the mask. So here we will have a gap between the mask and the substrate. So this method is called as proximity alignment. The other method is the projection alignment. Here, in order to have a very fine feature, what we can do is the mask and the substrate are separated by another lens apart from the one which is near to the UV source or the light source. Then the light is converged, and then again which is falling onto the substrate to create the patterns. So this method is called as projection based alignment. So alignment and exposure are 2 different steps which go hand in hand. There are 2 methods for exposure process. One is a direct step on wafers or direct write on wafers. The direct step-on wafers is used when the same pattern is repeated on the whole wafer, and as a result, only one cell of the array is needed for the transfer. As you can see in the image on the right hand side, there is a light source and a projection lens. We can use either a reticle or a mask in this place with another projection lens, and the wafer stage is moving in X and Y direction. So this X and Y direction could be utilized to transfer one design which is present on this reticle on a different location by the XY stage movement on the wafer. So if we use this methodology of direct step-on wafers, the systems which are performing these kind of procedures are called as steppers. The advantage in this system is that we need only one cell design and less time preparation for the design of the reticle or the mask. But the disadvantage is that if there is a small flaw in this one cell, then the entire wafer will be completely useless when we complete the process. So that one cell must be perfect, absolutely with no defects at all. The other method is the direct write on wafer, where there is no mask needed for this technique. So the process is serial and the wafer cycle time is proportional to the beam writing time. So instead of a light source here in direct write on wafer, we will have a laser or an electron beam or a focused ion beam that could be used to writing those patterns from the design file. So here the wafer cycle time is directly proportional on how fast the laser or the electron beam or the focused ion beam can perform the writing operation onto the wafer directly. So the different light sources that could be used for exposure consist of a high pressure mercury lamp or a UV lamp or lasers, which are generally used. Laser is an excimer laser. The sources feature what we have to see while choosing the light sources are it should have a shorter wavelength, because earlier we discussed about having a shorter wavelength will give us better resolution, and it should have a high intensity to penetrate through the mask or the reticle, and they should be very stable. They cannot keep varying in terms of wavelengths, so it has to be stable. On the right hand side, we can see the comparison between different light sources, their wavelengths, and the application feature in micrometer ranges. If we use a mercury lamp with the eye line of 365 nanometer, we can go as small as 0.35 to 0.25 microns. Although practically most of the systems give a 1 micron feature size in today's scenario also. Then for direct writing onto the wafer, we can either use a excimer laser or a fluorescent laser, depending on the feature size that is required, which can range from 0.1 micron to 0.25 micron when we use the excimer laser. So while we do the exposure process, one important issue that arises is the standing wave effect. So what is standing wave effect? The interference of the incident and the reflection lights when we project a light source results in a standing wave effect. So as shown in this image, you can see that there is a surface of the photoresist here and the surface of the substrate here. So in between here, when the light intensity passes through this wavelength, the average intensity expected is at the center. And when at the peak, we have a constructive interference of the incident and reflection lights, which will lead to overexposure. And when we are at the valley, we observe destructive interference of the incident and reflection lights, which will result in underexposure of the resist. So these scenarios, whether it is constructive interference or destructive interference, results in dissimilar resolution. We may not be able to achieve a proper resolution for the photoresist. So you can see in the image that there is a photoresist and there is a standing wave effect onto the photoresist, which results because of overexposure and underexposure. So this effect has to be eliminated. So what is the best methodology to eliminate this standing wave effect is that we can introduce a post-exposure bake after the exposure. As shown in the previous slide, the image here, had overexposure and underexposure wave patterns, which can be eliminated by the post-exposure bake, as shown in this image. See, the post-exposure bake uses a normal hot plate at about 110 to 130 degrees for about a minute. It is generally higher the temperature as compared to the soft bake that is being used before. For the same kind of photoresist, the PEB usually requires a higher temperature, and insufficient PEB will not completely eliminate the standing wave pattern. The purpose of doing this step is to eliminate the standing wave pattern. If we do not optimize the process with the proper temperature and time, then insufficient PEB will be resulting with standing wave pattern again. If we are increasing the temperature and the time, then overbaking will cause polymerization and affects the photoresist development. Development is a step which we will see shortly. So after this, we talked about alignment and different modes. When we align the mask to the wafer, there is one important factor that we have to consider is the alignment marks. As shown in the right hand side of the slide, the plus or the cross marks are used in general across all devices for the purpose of alignment. These alignment marks on both wafer and mask are used for registration of the patterns prior to exposure, and this can be done in both manual and automatic modes. Two alignment marks on opposite sides are required, as shown in the image at the bottom, which we can recognize through a split field microscope in order to perform the alignment. So for the purpose of doing this alignment, there is a number of degrees of freedom. At least for any aligner, we need at least 3 degrees of freedom in both in X, Y, and theta. Now let's move on to development. The developer is a solution which dissolves the softened part of the photoresist. After the exposure to the UV light, there will be a soft part of the photoresist when it is exposed. So this developer solvent dissolves the softened part of the photoresist. So it involves three basic steps, namely development, rinse, and dry. If we are using a positive photoresist, we can use a weak base solution like PMAH for the purpose of development. If a negative photoresist is used, then normally xylene can be used as a developer solution. So as indicated in the picture also, we can do the development, rinse, and spin dry. The different types of development are shown in the image. The first image shows proper normal development. This is how all the processes have to be. If the development process is incomplete, then it will result in some portion of the photoresist retained on the substrate, which may not be helpful for the further layer of deposition for the fabrication process. If the process is underdeveloped, then we see that there is a shape that is taken by the photoresist, and we may not get a proper coating again. And when it is overdeveloped, then there is etching of PR on the corners. So this will also result in a screw or a cap kind of fixture that will be resulting after the deposition of any metal. After the development, there is a hard baking process. This may not be required for soft photoresist, such as metal lift-off patterning. But the necessity of the hard baking is to stabilize and harden the developed photoresist and to remove any remaining traces of coating, either a solvent or a developer that is present on the wafer. In order to eliminate the solvent burst effects in vacuum processing and to remove the plastic flow that can be resulting. So the image on the right hand side shows as you increase the temperature, there is a plastic flow that is seen. At 100 degrees, the coating is proper, and at 140 degrees, it is a resultant of the plastic flow. See, the concerns with this process are it introduces stress into photoresist, and it may result in shrinkage of photoresist also. And if we are doing this for a longer duration and at elevated temperatures, it makes the resist removal very difficult. Hard baking can also be used for scenarios where there is a pinhole, as shown in this image. If there is a pinhole present in the photoresist, the hard baking eliminates that pinhole and it will fill, because the expansion of the photoresist is happening during the process. As discussed with the development also, in hard baking, we have a normal baking which will result in proper photoresist shapes or trenches, and over baking will result in non-uniform trenches. So after hard baking, pattern inspection is something which we will have to uh, consider in order to have a failure inspection or a strict PR and rework. When we talk about rework in photolithography process, rework is possible, and photoresist pattern is temporary. If we have already completed the etch or ion implantation pattern, which is permanent, then rework is not possible. Optical inspection or pattern inspection can be done using a scanning electron microscope or a optical microscope. So if you are using an optical microscope, it may not be suitable for less than 0.25 mm or features inspection, because the feature size will be smaller than the wavelength of the visible light. That is the reason why we may have to choose the scanning electron microscope options. So why do we need pattern inspection? Because there are number of defects that are possible during the overlay or alignment, such as run out, run in, reticle rotation or wafer rotation, misplacement in X or Y direction, and loss of critical dimension. So these errors should be seen or observed before going to the next step. And if there is a possibility of rework, that should be done after inspection of these inspection of the wafers. Now, after completing the photoresist coating and development, we have completed the process of photolithography. By as a last step, what we should do is remove the excess photoresist which are not required in certain places. For this purpose, we can use simple solvents. For positive photoresist, we can use acetone, trichloroethylene, phenol-based strippers. For negative photoresist, we can use MEK or MIBK. If we are having organic polymer debris, we can also use plasma etching with oxygen for effective removal. So after photolithography, there is a post-processing that is to be followed. I am referring to whether we are adding using a deposition method or subtracting using an etching method or modifying the process using doping or any such process. We can follow two different methodologies. One is etching or etch back. The other one is lift off. In etching or etch back, the photoresist is coated onto the layer that is to be patterned, and unwanted material is etched out as shown in the image. During liftoff, the pattern layer is deposited over the photoresist and unwanted material is lifted off along with the resist during the development process. So that's about the procedure of photolithography and the type of optical lithography that we come across and different steps in which we have to conduct photolithography. Towards the end, I would like to list out few safety aspects that we have to take care for the lithography process. The safety aspects can vary from chemical, mechanical, electrical, and radiation kind of importances. When we do chemical processes, especially when wet clean, we may tend to use sulfuric acid, which is corrosive, and hydrogen peroxide, which is a strong oxidizer. Then if we are using a solvent or and a developer for PR like xylene and HDMS as primer, they are all flammable and explosive. TMAH and mercury for positive resist development, and for UV lamp, they are poisonous and highly toxic. If we are using direct to wafer writing, then chlorine and fluorine, which are present in the lasers of excimer, are both toxic and corrosive. We have to take precautions and necessary safety steps to get protection from them. In terms of mechanical, there are moving parts, hot surfaces, high pressure pumps, So care has to be taken. Electrical, when we come into high voltage power supply and ground static charges of utmost importance, or we will end up spoiling the entire circuit, especially in CMOS processes. When we look into radiation aspects, UV light direct exposure can cause an eye injury, and UV light is also capable of breaking chemical bonds. So when we are using UV light and the chemicals close by, we need to be handling those carefully. So I would like to complete the session by giving a glimpse of what are the different lithography systems that are available at CMTI. Probably for people who have attended the entire series, a few of them may be repetitive. We have a mask aligner which can handle up to 6-inch wafers. Mask aligner is from SUS Microtech MSX. So it has both top and bottom side alignment with an alignment accuracy of 1 micrometer. And we also have different UV lamps with 350 watts, 500 watts, and 1000 watts power. And it can also perform bond alignment and automatic wedge error compensation for better alignment results is also possible. Then we also have a spin coater which can handle wafers up to 6-inch from Laurel. Then there are wet benches, all the baking and development, all these process cleaning, everything is done under the fume hoods or the wet benches. They are coming with a vertical laminar flow hood with a class 100 filter, and even spin coating of photoresist is done inside the wet bench. Etching of different materials of dielectric, metal, silicon, glass, etc. are also performed. Piranha cleaning, RCA cleaning, and ultrasonic also can be performed using these wet benches. For direct to wafer writing, we can also use mask writer. We have a mask writer from Microtech, which can have a maximum writable area of about 7 by 7 inches with a minimum feature size of 1 micron. We have two different wavelengths, so 405 and 365 nanometers, and interferometer based positioning for higher accuracy. And the stage resolution is about 5 nanometer with an exposure resolution of 0.6 microns. We also have a plasma cleaner, which is capable of process control and up to 300 watts power and frequency of 13.56 megahertz with the automatic matching network, which is generally used in removal of organic contaminants that are present during pre-processes and the post-processes of photolithography. We also have a nano imprint lithography system, which is mainly used for polymeric substrates development. I think this was covered during the other session of polymeric devices, so I'll not get into the details of that. And the optical microscope from Leica, which we use for optical inspection, it is capable of bright field, dark field, DIC, polarization, and fluorescence options under reflected light, and under transmitted light, it has a bright field and polarization. Has a maximum objective of 100x and motorized focus fire with 4 nanometer resolutions. Image stitching, autofocusing, 3D imaging, report generation, and interactive measurements are special features of this particular microscope. So I would like to thank all the participants who have been listening to this session. And if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer.